Good afternoon, Facebook. I'm Erie Times News online reporter Sarah Grabsky. I am here in the Erie Times News newsroom being joined, well, not the newsroom, but the building, being joined by our business reporter, Jim Martin. He is here and we are here today discussing GE transportation. So I'm going to start off by saying just have a little grace with me because I am on camera, obviously talking with Jim, but I'm also going to be moderating your comments, which are welcomed, and we want to hear from you. Any questions, suggestions? What do you want to know about GE transportation? We're going to kind of fly by through some topics here today, but we really want to know what you guys want to know, and this is kind of your discussion. So please feel free to chime in with questions and comments, and I will be moderating them as they come in. So be patient with us, but so of course we're having this chat because GE Transportation announced last week that they will be merging with Wabtec, which is a company right outside of Pittsburgh, right, Jim?
Right, correct.
So obviously that's kind of moving the needle forward here in what has been a tumultuous past few years for GE Transportation here in Erie. So we're going to start off by talking about exactly that. Jim, just kind of give us a history, bring us up to speed, what has been going on with the GE Transportation here within the past decade or so.
Sure, Sarah. As Sarah said, I'm Jim Martin, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. As Sarah said, GE Transportation, or GE Rail as it used to be called, it's a company that's been our neighbor for 110 years basically. But the last 10 years or even 6 or 7 have been particularly eventful. This is a company that's gone from, I think looking back just even 6 years, from about 5,500, 5,600 employees that at that time was headquartered in GE, here in Erie rather, had its only plant, had its only locomotive manufacturing plant right here in Erie. Fast forward just a few years, now we're looking at a situation that's changing where in just a few months, if the company moves ahead with its plans, they won't be manufacturing any locomotives here. And as you well know, a few years ago they moved their headquarters to Chicago. That in itself is a lot of change to digest. Along with that change, we've gone from, like I said, about 5,500 employees to around 2,500. That may not be the only change. As we look at the company right now, we have those 2,500 employees, and even before this Wabtec sale, which was announced about a week ago, the company's been kind of signaling, hinting that the changes in the manufacturing might go deeper here. We've still got about 2,500, or rather 1,500 manufacturing employees, people who build things, people who build components for locomotives, people who build mining equipment. But when the company talks these days about the Erie plant, they talk about it in terms of being an engineering and design center. They've not been, and messaging is important from a company like GE. It tends to mean something. It tends to either mean, it could be a message for the union, it could be a message about where they're going, or there could be an indication of what their intentions are. So that brings us up to where we are today with an impending merger, or really in this case, a purchase by Wabtec, another company with a long history in the rail business.
We've got a few comments coming in here. So Jim, commenter Mike says, GE has been downsizing operations in Erie ever since the 1960s.
Right, there's been, that's accurate, absolutely. There were other things made here, other products made here. So Mike's correct. There's been this long history. There were at one point appliances made here. There were parts of GE aviation products made here. So that's accurate. Other things have been spun out to other places. And as part of that downsizing, of course, all of industry, all of manufacturing has, over the years, been finding ways to do more with fewer employees.
And Jim, you could probably also speak to this. A commenter says, how sad for Erie that its economy depends on one major corporation. It's not fair to GE, and it's not fair to the workers of Erie. And then shares, my husband and I were both born and raised in Erie, but we moved to Chicago 20 years ago to find gainful employment.
Well, I understand that perspective, and it's hopefully becoming less true, because as time has gone by, there's less of a dependence on GE Transportation. It's still an incredibly important employer. The economic impact.
Stick with us real quick. I'm just sure that this is correct. Just want you guys to have some.
Sure.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, you doing all right?
Yep, we're good. Okay.
Hopefully we fixed our technical difficulties.
Sorry about that, guys. All right, Jim, continue.
It's still an incredibly important employer. They account for, they pay good wages, provide good benefits, and they're important to us. But the economy has become more diverse. We have, our number one employer is now an insurance company that shows no intention of going anywhere. They're growing, they're building. There are other companies that are rising to the forefront. Our hospitals are key employers. So as important as GE Transportation still is, the economy is not built solely on GE Transportation.
Let's talk, going back to, we were talking a little bit about the past few years. When did this really, I think a big shift in change in attitude here in Erie was when the Fort Worth plant was built, and I forget if that was in 2010 or 2011, but one of the draws to that, or I guess one of the talking points, was that Fort Worth didn't have a union, correct?
That's correct. It remains correct.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about Eries Union. You know what I mean? Has that hurt us, the plant, the city, in a way, or?
That's what a lot of people will say it has. There's a body of thought out there that Erie should become a right-to-work county, meaning, there are a lot of right-to-work states out there. Texas is one of them, which means it's not a union climate. And there are many in the communities who say very loudly that the union should have accepted concessions that would have resulted in a lower wage scale. On the other hand, and I think it's maybe easy when you're not a union worker working at the GE plant to make those concessions on the behalf of someone else. But if you're earning a particular wage and you've bargained for that wage and those benefits,
right,
perhaps it's not so easy to give up what you've bargained for and what you've worked for.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of brings us up to speed, where kind of how we got into the situation that we have. Has any work from Erie, I know that you have, you talk to GE Transportation and their officials, at least once a month, if not once a week. Have they told you that any work has been displaced to other areas, like to Chicago, to Fort Worth, or,
Well, certainly to Fort Worth. I mean, the locomotive production is all being displaced to Fort Worth. What we've lost to Chicago is more about standing. We've lost, something in the order of maybe 100 jobs, maybe something more than that. We certainly lost status. Erie lost, initially it was maybe 50 jobs when headquarters moved to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But many people were predicting at the time it would lead to something bigger, and it seems to have happened. When the Fort Worth plant was opened, correctly or incorrectly, many employees here at the time perceived that as being an overflow plant and accepted it as such. It's clearly become something more than an overflow plant. It's become the manufacturing plant for locomotives.
So how many workers, I know you mentioned this at the beginning, how many workers have been displaced since the Fort Worth plant was?
Well, it's hard to separate being displaced from, they've also gone through, we've lost a couple thousand employees. However, you can't blame all of that in Fort Worth. GE Transportation has just come through, where it's still in the midst of a historic slowdown. Mm-hmm. There was really like a 2-year period where they didn't have an order for a single North American locomotive, which I believe is probably a historic slowdown. Mm-hmm. At the same time, while we're losing workers here in Erie right now, they are in fact hiring at Fort Worth.
Which is you know, a lot of people will say, was the writing on the wall, you know, that
Right, correct.
this was. But anyway, okay, so bringing us back up to speed, let's talk a little bit about Wabtec, this new company, and we don't know much about them, right, Jim? Or
well, I mean, you know, it's hard to know in a sense what to expect. I mean, if you're going out for dinner, you look at Yelp or TripAdvisor. There's no equivalent for what to expect when you've got a new company or a big company buying your company. It is a big company. It's by some measures a little smaller than GE Transportation. It's certainly more employees. There's worldwide GE Transportation had about 9,000. Wabtec had about 18,000, but their revenues were a little smaller, something below $4 billion. To GE Transportation would have varied between $4 and $5 billion a year. But together, it's going to be a pretty big company. It's going to push itself into the Fortune 500. You know, it's hard to know what to expect. It's hard to know what's around the next corner. They do have, you know, a long reputation in the freight business and the locomotive business. They were started out as Westinghouse Air Brakes company, and they're a solid company that's been around for a long time. And some people I talk to, feel like it's the best we could really hope for. It's not a venture capital firm. It's a company rooted in Western Pennsylvania. It's a company that's really just down the road outside Pittsburgh. As county executive Kathy Dahlkemper said to me, she likes the fact that they're in a little town again outside Pittsburgh called Wilmerding that they could have left there. They could have gone somewhere else. She likes the feel of them staying there. She likes the feel of them, being rooted in something, being rooted in Western Pennsylvania. So maybe there's something hopeful there. Scott Slauson, the president of the union here at GE, also is, maybe he's got no choice in the matter, but he's sounding a hopeful tone. He's going into this with a positive attitude about the buyer.
That's exactly where I was going to go next. Is you talk to Scott again a lot. Mm-hmm. So what has his attitude been? I guess the last few years, and then toward this Wabtec deal.
Well, I think some people, he's going to have his critics, and of course he has. People, he hears it all the time. You should have taken this deal or that deal.
Right.
But give him his due. He's been a fierce advocate for what he thinks is right and what he's seen as his duty to his membership. And I don't want to speak for him, but I feel like he's eager to deal with someone new. I think that he thinks things could improve. Maybe I'm reading him wrong, but that's my take.
So just from like a business perspective, somebody who, like me, might not be that familiar, will Wabtec handle, what does this merger mean? Will they handle business operations then, or will GE Transportation still have a dog in the fight, or?
Well, there's still Rafael Santana, who's the current CEO of GE Transportation, will remain the head of its freight division, will remain in Chicago. It's hard to know what structure they'll keep in place. It's hard to know what GE DNA will remain in place. But you've got to think that this company gets Wabtecanized or something like that. I'm not sure what the word is, but you've got to think that some of their culture takes hold here. And it's hard to know what that's going to mean.
Okay, we've got a lot of people chiming in. GE transferred the off-highway and locomotive division to Fort Worth to destroy the livable wage union jobs at their Erie, Pennsylvania plant.
Some of that work has come back.
Right, right.
Not sure how much, but some of that is back here.
Hold on 1 second. Oh, I guess we just didn't move. That's probably
the lights were out. They're back.
We're back. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Maybe the politicians, and you can speak to this because you've talked to a lot of the of Erie politicians about GE and the climate. Maybe politicians need to work more with partnerships with other regions to buy stuff from Erie, like was done with Zubo China in the past.
That's a thought. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much sway they can really have here.
off of this, Jim, you're a business reporter. A lot of people, again, will say our population is declining. Different things like in Erie are declining. Does GE have a lot to do with that? Has there in effect been a ripple due to these layoffs?
I think to some extent there's some of that, but I don't know if we've seen maybe as much as you might see eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the people from GE, the one thing a lot of them had going for them was there are TAA and TRA benefits available to them as a government benefit for people who lost their jobs due to foreign trade. And under those benefits, hundreds of displaced GE workers were able to get retraining essentially for free and extension of their unemployment benefits. Many of those employees are just now completing those studies or in the midst of completing those studies, and many of them remain in the community. Hopefully many of them will continue to remain in the community. Is there a chance that some of them have moved on, left the community? Of course. And that some of them will move on, also, of course. But it's had to have played a role. With the Erie County lost, I think, 1,700 people in the last year or two. I think that was the latest census number.
Right.
GE is bound to be at least a slice of that.
And kind of in that vein, you've also had the opportunity to talk with a lot of these people who have gotten different training or kind of made good out of the bad, right?
Yeah, certainly. I did a story a few weeks ago, and some people are really feeling good about how they're landing and how they're ending up. Mm-hmm. I've talked particularly to a couple guys in the medical profession who really feel a sense of empowerment and a sense of accomplishment for, they even acknowledge, hey, I may not make quite as much as I did before, but they like the sense of security, the sense that they own their skill, that they can go wherever they need to go, and that they've got something that they own and they control, and that they've got, they think they've got a sense of employability. And
just last week, you did a story on GE Transportation fell from being our largest employer, right? Or was that this week?
I think last week.
It was last week. I don't know. They all blend together. Which is, that's a big deal for a lot of Erie people. There's a sense of history when it comes to GE.
Yeah, and I think there's a sadness for a lot of people. People are running GE down in a sense right now, but this is a company that's done a lot of good for this community. This is a company that's given millions of dollars to the community, that's employed, some simple math and a little bit of logic leads me to conclude that over the years, they've employed more people than the current population of the city. Mm-hmm. They've donated countless hours to the city or to the community. It's been a major force. It's you still hear old people refer to it as the GE. It's been the lifeblood and a real integral part of the community. So there is a sense of sadness, a sense of something lost. At the same time, there are countless communities in America that would give anything to have the company, even the smaller company that we still have today, move in. They would move heaven and earth to get this company to come to their town. So we need to keep that in mind. But it does show it's shifting. It shows, maybe the decline of manufacturing, and in our case, the ascendancy of another company that continues to grow here, in this case, Erie Insurance.
Right, which is, kind of a positive or silver lining, I guess. I was kind of thinking, we were doing stories at one point before the Wabtec deal about, was there going to be a GE, in Erie in 5-10 years? Do you think that Wabtec, in a sense, not saved, I don't want to say saved, but, will revitalize the GE community here?
I think there's really the potential for that, but I think the question marks remain, or maybe they're even bigger, because before we had a sense, I think, or at least I had a sense that GE really was doubling down on its commitments to a certain type of presence here. Maybe they were raising question marks about manufacturing, but they were repeating again and again their commitments. This is an engineering and design center. They've got a control center here where they monitor locomotives from around the world. They were doubling down on that kind of a commitment. One would hope, and one could even logically conclude, that Wabtec would stand by that sort of a commitment. But there, question marks could be raised about whether or not Wabtec has a different plan. One would hope maybe they'll even look at, as the union president Scott Slauson hopes, maybe they will look at manufacturing with fresh eyes and see something they want to expand there. But time's going to show us.
Right, only time will tell. We have a question, and I don't know if you've asked about this, Jim. What will happen to GE employee pension plans, and will current employees remain employed?
I've read something actually from, there's a transcript of a conference call with Wabtec, and they have committed to taking on those pension plans. So that's really good news. That's a positive. I mean, there's always government controls that ensure that, but it sounds like there's not going to be a fight there. It sounds like that's going to be something they willingly assume. So that's good news. As far as, for the moment, the employees are guaranteed. The current contract with union employees runs through June of next year, and this deal isn't expected to close until early next year. There's always unanswered questions with one company buys another, and I'm not going to pretend to be able to sort that all out right now. I know it's something Scott Slauson of the union is working on. He's working on ensuring that his union membership, continues to receive the benefits that they're expecting.
Which is, as far as good or bad, I mean, sounds like pretty good news to me. But especially in a climate that has been declining over the past 5 or 10 years, a lot of people are commenting just about. Somebody just said it doesn't look like GE has done a whole lot to maintain their presence. They've let most of their buildings go. Have you been over to the GE plant lately?
Yeah, I've been over there a lot. I mean, for one thing, I know they've torn down a few buildings, maybe partly for tax purposes, for assessment purposes. Frankly, they don't need as many as they used to. This was, it's a huge campus. They're doing fewer things there. And clearly they don't need as many structures as they used to.
Another commenter says, the info I got at GE is the transfer of work will go as planned.
Yeah, in fact, for a while it seemed like there was some vagueness I was getting from their end. Like, I wasn't getting a definitive yes, it will go as planned. I did a story, I don't know, I think it was in April now, where they said, yes, it's going to go as planned. It will happen by the end of the year. They were very clear on that.
From your point, you talk to GE transportation officials. What has been their attitude toward the Erie plant? Has it shifted at all?
No, I mean, they're always respectful. They're always, they've always been clear for years now. From the spokespeople I speak with to the CEOs I've spoken with over the years, the one thing they have been very clear and firm on is that they need to have what they call competitive wages at every location. And they've also been clear that they don't feel they get competitive wages from the Erie plant. Beyond that, they've been respectful of the workers here, of the work that they do. But their actions in wanting to to negotiate effects bargaining, to in some respects effectively reopen contracts, show that they've not been happy with the wages they're paying here.
So what exactly is happening at the what kind of work is happening at the plant right now, because locomotive production was halted.
Well, they're still doing a minimal amount of that. Well, they're doing a certain amount of it, and they will be potentially till the end of the year. It ends, I'm told, by the end of the year. There's still production on a number of, they make components. I won't tell you which components, I'm not entirely sure, but there's a lot of parts and assemblies and sub-assemblies that go into a locomotive, and they're still making parts for off-highway trucks and mining trucks. So there's still, in fact, despite the fact that they will end locomotive production here, this is still their biggest manufacturing plant with far more employees than Fort Worth has.
That's important to point out. Do you know, I guess the work split between the two?
There's easily double as many manufacturing employees here as is in Fort Worth.
Oh, you gotta move in. Sorry, the light is like motion sensitive, so if we don't move for a while, it turns off apparently. Pro tip. Okay. Somebody just questioned, if Wabtec planned to build locomotives in Erie, why would they go along with GE's plan to transfer locomotive production to Texas?
Well, they've only owned it for a week.
Right.
Well, no, they don't even own it yet. For that matter.
Right.
So,
talk us through what that looks like.
They've got plenty of time to revisit that. They're new on the scene, and they won't own it for months. So, they may well stick by the plan that GE set in motion. Mm-hmm. But if they want to revisit that, they'll have every opportunity to do it.
So Jim, just from a reporting standpoint, what's next for you? Will you talk with Wabtec companies?
Yeah, that's one of the next things. It was a flurry of activity over the last week. I haven't really had a chance to go after that opportunity, and I hope to sit down with them or reach out to them in some substantive way and get to know some of the people there and get some clearer sense of what they might have in mind for Erie, and I'll be doing that.
And tell me a little bit, he just wrote a story about this, so I guess I probably already know the answer, but share with us a little bit about what, you talked about Kathy Dahlkemper's reaction to the Wabtec news. What's been the Erie reaction, the people, the residents, the employees, the ex-employees?
It really is varied. And it's hard to encapsulate that in any one story. I think a few of the people I did talk to, I think there's a little bit of fatigue. I think there's fatigue over what they've seen for the last few years. And some of the ones I talked to in that particular story, it's like, okay, just enough. And they're hoping for something. They're hopeful at this point that this could produce better results, that there could be something, they have a lot of love and fondness for what GE's brought to this community and a lot of good memories of the company, but they're hoping that maybe there'll be better results in it for the community under new ownership.
We'll take a few more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up here, but Pat says, what happens to the current pay scale, Jim? We kind of already touched this, but...
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the union thinks that's a really great question too. I have to say this though. Let's assume that the union remains being recognized by Wabtec and there's no big issue there. I really look for a very tough negotiation come next June. If the current climate remains as it is and the talk continues about competitive wages, and I don't know why that would change, I look for that to be a very, very tough negotiation.
It absolutely will be. And another commenter says, just reiterate, Wabtec hasn't taken over yet. GE is still in control, so that will be, what's the timeline again on that, Jim?
Well, by the time those negotiations start, unless something goes awry, Wabtec will be driving the bus.
All right, so thanks so much for joining us here today. We're going to wrap it up. This video will be available on our Facebook page. We will be monitoring the comments. If you have questions or concerns, Jim sits 2 desks over from me, so I can get his wisdom for as long as you'd like. But again, thanks so much for joining us, and feel free to chime in with your comments and questions as they come in, or Jim's always available on email, jmartin@timesnews. Jim.martin@timesnews.com. All right, guys, thanks so much for sticking with us through the technical difficulties, and we will see you next week.
Thanks. Have a good day.